She was just 12 years old, freezing and alone on a mountain road with nowhere left to run, when she found a cabin that should have been empty. But inside its walls was a secret worth $230 million that would change everything she thought she knew about survival, family, and the meaning of home. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The snow fell like needles against Maya's face as she stumbled through the darkness, her thin jacket doing nothing against the bitter mountain cold. 12 years old, barely 90 pounds, she'd been walking for hours with no idea where she was going, only knowing she couldn't go back. Her sneakers, already soaked through, crunched against the frozen ground with each desperate step. The world had narrowed to nothing but white and wind and the burning in her lungs. She'd left everything behind 3 hours ago. Not that there was much to leave. A backpack with 2 changes of clothes, a water bottle she'd already emptied, a granola bar she'd eaten within the first mile, and $47 she'd been saving for 2 years, tucked into her sock where no one would think to look. That was it. That was all she had to show for 12 years of life. The foster home she'd fled from was the 5th one in 3 years, each worse than the last. This one, the Hendersons, had seemed okay at first. They smiled during the social worker visits, kept the house clean, said all the right things. But Mr. Henderson drank. And when he drank, his hands got heavy. Mrs. Henderson looked the other way, too tired or too scared to intervene. Maya had learned early to make herself invisible, to slip into corners, to breathe quietly and move like a shadow. But tonight had been different. Tonight, after he'd grabbed her arm so hard she knew it would bruise purple by morning, after he'd thrown a plate that shattered inches from her head, something inside her had snapped. Not broken, snapped into place. She'd waited until they were asleep, stuffed her backpack with whatever she could grab, and climbed out the bathroom window into the November night. She had no plan, no destination. Just the desperate animal instinct that said, run, keep running, don't stop. The mountain road she'd been following for the past hour had narrowed to almost nothing. Trees pressed in from both sides, their branches heavy with snow, creaking and groaning in the wind like old bones. The storm had intensified, visibility dropping to barely 10 feet ahead. Maya's hands had gone numb an hour ago. Her face felt raw, wind-burned. Each breath scraped her throat like broken glass. She knew she was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind you didn't walk away from. Hypothermia didn't care that you were 12. It didn't care that you were running from monsters in human skin. It would take you just as easily as it took anyone else. Her foot caught on something buried beneath the snow, a root or a rock, and she went down hard. Her palms hit the frozen ground, pain shooting up her wrists. For a moment, she just stayed there on her hands and knees, head hanging, tears mixing with snowflakes on her cheeks. The wind screamed through the trees like it was laughing at her. "Get up," a voice whispered inside her head. It sounded like her grandmother, the only person who'd ever really loved her, gone now for 4 years. "Get up, baby. You're stronger than this." Maya pushed herself to her feet, legs shaking. She took another step forward, then another. That's when she saw it. At first, she thought it was just a darker shadow among the trees, a trick of the storm and her exhausted mind. But as she stumbled closer, squinting through the driving snow, the shape solidified into something real, a structure, small, low to the ground, almost completely buried in snowdrifts, a cabin. Maya's heart lurched in her chest. She half ran, half fell toward it, her numb feet barely cooperating. The closer she got, the more details emerged from the white chaos. Stone walls, thick and solid, a sloped roof sagging under the weight of snow, a single window dark and empty as a dead eye, and a door, wooden and weather-beaten, but still intact. She reached the small covered porch and grabbed the door handle with both hands. Locked. Of course it was locked. Her vision blurred with tears of frustration and desperation. She was so cold now that she'd stopped shivering, which she knew from health class was a very bad sign. Maya looked around frantically. To her left, partially hidden by an overgrown bush, was a window. Without thinking, Without caring about consequences or property damage or anything except the screaming need to get out of the cold, she picked up a rock from beside the door and smashed it through the glass. The sound was sharp and final in the muffled quiet of the storm. She knocked away the remaining shards with the rock, then used her jacket sleeve to protect her hand as she reached inside and felt for a lock. Her frozen fingers found a simple latch. It turned easily, and the window swung inward. Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed the window frame, pulled herself up and through, and tumbled onto the floor inside. The landing knocked the wind out of her, but she didn't care. She was inside, out of the wind, out of the snow. She lay there for a long moment, gasping, her body starting to register just how cold it really was. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet. The cabin was pitch dark except for the faint grey light coming through the broken window. She pulled out her phone, her lifeline, the one thing she'd managed to keep charged at the foster home. 3% battery. No signal, of course. But the flashlight still worked. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing her sanctuary. The cabin was small, just one main room from what she could see. The walls were stone, thick and sturdy, with wooden beams crossing the ceiling. A fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold and empty. In the corner stood an old iron bed frame with no mattress. A small wooden table and 2 chairs sat near the window. Shelves lined another wall, empty except for dust and the husks of dead insects. But what caught Maya's attention, what made her breath catch despite the cold, was how clean everything was. Not clean like recently used, but preserved. There were no signs of decay, no rot, no animal nests. The floor, though dusty, was solid. The windows, aside from the one she'd broken, were intact. This place had been sealed, protected, maintained somehow. She moved deeper into the room, her wet shoes leaving prints on the dusty floor. Behind the main room, she found a smaller space, a kitchen of sorts. An old hand pump sat over a deep sink. Cabinets lined the walls. She opened them one by one, expecting nothing, finding exactly that, all empty, all clean. But in the last cabinet, pushed way in the back, her flashlight beam caught something. She reached in and pulled out 3 items: a box of matches in a sealed plastic bag, a candle burned halfway down, and a wool blanket wrapped in thick plastic. Maya's hands shook as she tore open the plastic around the blanket. It smelled musty, but was dry, thick and warm. She wrapped it around her shoulders immediately, feeling the first real relief since she'd started running hours ago. The matches were dry too, protected by their bag. Small miracles. She returned to the fireplace and knelt in front of it, examining the hearth. Old ashes sat in the bottom, but above them, someone had carefully stacked kindling and larger pieces of wood, ready to light. As if they'd known someone might need it someday. As if they'd been waiting. With trembling fingers, Maya struck a match. The sulfur flared bright in the darkness, and she touched it to the kindling. The dry wood caught immediately, flames licking upward, hungry and alive. She added more kindling, then one of the larger logs. Within minutes, fire crackled and danced in the hearth, throwing warm orange light across the stone walls. Maya sat back on her heels, staring at the flames, and for the first time in hours, maybe years, she felt something that wasn't fear or pain or exhaustion. She felt hope. Small, fragile, but there. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. 2% battery. A notification flashed across the screen, then another. Missed calls from the foster home. A text from Mrs. Henderson. "Where are you? Come back right now." Then from Mr. Henderson. "You're going to regret this." Maya's stomach twisted. She turned the phone off completely, preserving what little battery remained. They'd call the police eventually, report her as a runaway. The social worker would get involved. They'd search for her. But not tonight. Not in this storm. Tonight, she had time. She moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. Slowly, painfully, feeling began to return to her fingers and toes. It hurt worse than the numbness had, pins and needles turning to sharp stabs of pain. But she welcomed it. because pain meant she was still alive, still fighting. As the warmth spread through her body, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She hadn't slept more than a few hours in days, too afraid to close her eyes in that house. Now, with the fire crackling and the storm raging harmlessly outside, her body demanded rest. Maya pulled the blanket tighter and lay down on the floor in front of the fireplace, using her backpack as a pillow. The stone floor was hard and cold, but the fire was warm and the blanket was thick. Her eyes drifted closed. Just for a minute, she told herself. Just rest for a minute. She fell asleep to the sound of wind howling around the cabin's stone walls, a sound that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like a lullaby, like the world itself was standing guard, while she finally rested. Maya woke to pale grey light filtering through the cabin's windows and the dying embers of the fire. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The escape, the storm, the impossible discovery of this place. She sat up quickly, heart pounding, expecting to see police officers or social workers or Mr. Henderson's angry face. But she was alone. The storm had passed. Through the intact windows, she could see snow piled high against the cabin walls, pristine and untouched, except for the faint impression of her desperate approach the night before, already being filled in by fresh powder. The world was silent in that particular way it gets after a heavy snowfall, muffled and hushed. She stood slowly, her body aching from sleeping on the stone floor. The fire had burned down to glowing coals. She added more wood from the stack beside the fireplace, coaxing the flames back to life. The cabin filled with warmth again, chasing away the morning cold. In the daylight, she could see details she'd missed in the darkness. The craftsmanship of the stone walls, each rock fitted perfectly to the next. The way the wooden beams across the ceiling were hand-hewn, showing the marks of careful work. The floor was made of wide planks, worn smooth but solid, not a single board loose or warped. This wasn't some thrown-together hunting shack. This was built to last, built with purpose. Maya moved to the window she'd broken and looked out at the surrounding forest. Trees stretched in every direction, heavy with snow. She had no idea where she was, how far she'd walked, or how far civilization might be. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since that granola bar yesterday afternoon. She returned to the kitchen area and tried the hand pump over the sink. At first, nothing happened. She pumped harder, the handle creaking with disuse. Then water spluttered out, brown and rusty. She kept pumping, and after a minute, the water ran clear and cold. She cupped her hands under the stream and drank deeply, the water icy and pure, tasting of minerals and stone. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. She explored more carefully now, opening every cabinet and drawer. Most were empty. But in a drawer near the sink, she found a few items. A manual can opener, a fork and spoon, a small pot. In another cabinet, she discovered something that made her want to cry with relief. 3 cans of soup, their labels faded but still readable. Chicken noodle, tomato, vegetable. The expiration dates had long passed, years ago, but canned food lasted forever if the cans weren't damaged. These looked fine. Someone had stocked this place, had prepared it. But when, and why, and where were they now? Maya took the can of chicken noodle soup, opened it with the manual opener, and poured it into the pot. She had no way to heat it on the fireplace safely, so she ate it cold, straight from the pot, using the spoon she'd found. It was thick, congealed, and utterly delicious. She ate slowly, making it last, savoring every bite. As she ate, she studied the cabin more carefully. Something about it felt off, not wrong exactly, but intentional. The way everything was positioned, the way the fireplace dominated the room but sat slightly off-center. The way one section of the stone wall looked newer than the rest, the mortar between the stones just a shade lighter. She walked over to that wall, running her hand across the stones. They were cold and smooth under her palm. She pressed harder, testing, solid. But as her hand moved across the surface, she noticed something. A stone near the bottom, about knee-height, sat just slightly proud of the others, almost imperceptible. But there. Maya knelt and pressed on it. Nothing happened. She tried pushing from different angles. Then, almost by accident, she pushed and twisted at the same time. Something clicked deep within the wall. She jerked her hand back, heart racing. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a section of the wall near the fireplace began to move. Not swinging open like a door, but sliding back, receding into the wall itself with a soft grinding of stone on stone. Behind it was darkness. Maya stared at the opening, her breath coming fast and shallow. A hidden door, an actual hidden door in the wall of this remote cabin in the middle of nowhere. Every instinct told her to push the stone back, seal it up, pretend she'd never found it. But curiosity, that dangerous human trait, whispered louder than fear. She grabbed a piece of burning wood from the fireplace, holding it up like a torch, and approached the opening. The gap was narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, but tall enough to walk through if she turned sideways. Beyond it, stone steps led down into the darkness, disappearing below the level of the cabin floor. A basement, or a cellar, or something else entirely. Maya hesitated. This was how people died in horror movies, she thought. Young girl alone in remote cabin finds secret passage and goes down into the darkness. Cut to credits. But she wasn't in a movie. She was in real life, where the monsters wore human faces and lived in suburban homes and smiled at social workers. Whatever was down there couldn't be worse than what she'd left behind. She took a breath and stepped through the opening, turning sideways to fit. The stone walls pressed close on either side. The steps were steep, carved directly into the rock, worn smooth in the center from use. How much use? How many people had walked down these steps over the years? She counted as she descended. 10 steps, 15, 20. The air grew colder, damper. The torch in her hand cast wild shadows on the walls. 30 steps. The passage opened up. Maya stepped into a room and stopped dead, her torch wavering. The space was larger than the cabin above, stretching back into shadows beyond the reach of her makeshift light. But what made her breath catch wasn't the size. It was what filled it. Wooden crates, dozens of them, stacked neatly along the walls. Metal shelves holding boxes and containers. Filing cabinets lined up like soldiers. And in the center of the room, sitting on a large wooden table, a leather-bound journal and a locked metal box. The air smelled old, dry, preserved, like a museum or a library. Nothing moved. No mice, no insects, no signs of decay. Just careful, deliberate storage. Maya moved deeper into the room, her torch throwing light across surfaces untouched by time. She approached the nearest crate and found it wasn't nailed shut. The lid lifted easily, hinges well-oiled despite the years. Inside, wrapped in thick plastic, were bundles of cash. $100 bills, stacked and bound with paper bands. Her hands shook as she set down the torch and picked up one bundle. The bills were old, printed decades ago from the look of them, but perfectly preserved. Each bundle was marked $10,000. She counted quickly. 20 bundles in this crate alone. $200,000. She moved to the next crate. The same. And the next, and the next. Her mind reeled, trying to calculate, trying to understand. How much money was down here? Who had put it here? Why? But it wasn't just cash. She opened other containers and found gold bars, small but unmistakable, stacked like firewood. Velvet bags full of jewelry, diamonds that caught the torchlight and threw rainbows across the stone walls. Stock certificates from companies she'd never heard of. Bonds. Bearer bonds, she realized, remembering something from a movie she'd seen once. Untraceable, valuable, and documents. So many documents. Deeds to properties, contracts, letters. All carefully organized, labeled, filed away like someone had planned to return to them someday, but never did. Maya's legs felt weak. She sank onto the floor, her back against a crate of cash, and stared at the wealth surrounding her. This wasn't possible. Things like this didn't happen to 12-year-old girls running from foster homes. This was fairy tale stuff, movie magic, the kind of luck that didn't exist in the real world. But here it was, real, tangible, waiting. Her eyes fell on the journal sitting on the table. She stood and walked over to it, her footsteps echoing softly in the stone chamber. The leather was soft, well worn. She opened it carefully, afraid it might crumble in her hands. The first page was dated 1983, written in careful, precise handwriting. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if I'm gone, then this place served its purpose. My name is Thomas. This cabin, this cash, it's not what you think. It's not greed. It's not crime. It's insurance. It's hope. It's a promise I made a long time ago to people who had nothing left but faith that someone would catch them when they fell. Maya's hands trembled as she read. Page after page, Thomas had documented everything. Who he was, what he'd done, why this fortune existed. He'd been a banker, she learned. Not the Wall Street kind, but a small-town banker who'd seen the crash of 1929 destroy lives, watched as people lost everything while the wealthy hoarded their wealth. He'd spent his life quietly, carefully, moving money out of sight, protecting it from those who would seize it, from governments and criminals, and even from the banks themselves. He'd created this place, this vault, as a safeguard. For refugees, he wrote, for people running, for those who needed a second chance and couldn't find it in the system. I've helped 73 families over the years, one entry read, dated 1996. Each one given enough to start over. No questions asked, no judgment passed, just handed them hope wrapped in $100 bills and sent them on their way to build something new. The last entry was dated 2008, 15 years ago. Thomas's handwriting had grown shaky, harder to read. I'm old now. Sick. The cancer is winning. I've spent my life moving through shadows, helping ghosts become people again. But my time is done. I'm sealing this place one last time. If someone finds it, if someone needs it, then let this be their miracle. Let them know that somewhere in this broken world, someone believed in second chances. Maya closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't alone. Even here, even now, she wasn't alone. This man, dead for who knows how long, had left her a lifeline across time and distance. She looked around the chamber again, seeing it differently now. Not as a treasure hoard, but as a legacy, as love made tangible, as proof that goodness existed even when it felt like the world had none left. But the question remained. What was she supposed to do with it? She climbed back up the stone stairs, slowly, carefully, her mind spinning. The cabin felt different now, sacred somehow. She pushed the stone, and the wall slid back into place, sealing the chamber below. The click of the mechanism sounded final, like a promise being made. Maya fed the fire and wrapped herself in the blanket, but sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the flames and thought about Thomas, about his life spent in shadows helping strangers, about the 73 families he'd saved, about the fortune sitting beneath her feet. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered forest in shades of orange and pink. Another night was coming, another night of hiding. But for the first time since she could remember, Maya didn't feel hunted. She felt something else, something unfamiliar and fragile, but undeniably real. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found her way home. The first week in the cabin passed like a fever dream. Maya would wake each morning to the pale light filtering through frosted windows, feed the fire, pump fresh water, and try to make sense of the impossible situation she'd found herself in. $230 million. That's what she'd calculated, carefully and methodically, over 3 days of inventorying the underground chamber. She hadn't touched anything except to count it, hadn't moved a single bundle of cash or bar of gold. Something about it felt sacred, untouchable, like disturbing a grave or a church. Instead, she'd focused on survival, on the immediate needs of staying warm, staying fed, staying hidden. The cabin revealed its secrets slowly, like a person learning to trust. On her third day there, while examining the stone fireplace more carefully, Maya discovered the mortar between certain stones was actually clay, cleverly colored to match. She could scrape it away with her fingernail. Behind these false seams were small, hollow spaces, each containing something useful. Waterproof matches, a folding knife, a coil of strong rope, even a small first aid kit sealed in plastic. Thomas had thought of everything. The bed frame in the corner, which she'd initially dismissed as useless without a mattress, turned out to have a false bottom. She'd noticed it by accident when she'd tried to move the frame closer to the fireplace for warmth. The metal had rattled oddly. Investigation revealed a thin panel that slid aside, exposing a compartment containing freeze-dried camping meals, the kind that lasted decades, a water purification system, and 3 wool blankets, even thicker than the one she'd found in the cabinet. It was like the cabin itself was taking care of her, revealing what she needed exactly when she needed it. By the end of her first week, Maya had established a routine: wake with the sun, feed the fire, pump water and set it in the pot to warm near the flames. Eat a careful portion of food, rationing what she had. During the day, she'd explore the cabin and the immediate area outside, never going far, always keeping the stone walls in sight. At night, she'd sit by the fire and read Thomas's journals, learning about the man who'd built this place, this refuge, this miracle. The journals numbered 12 in total, spanning from 1957 to 2008. 51 years of careful documentation. Thomas hadn't been a banker in the traditional sense, she learned. He'd been what he called a guardian of transitions. People would come to him, desperate people, running people, people who needed to disappear and start over. He'd help them. Some were fleeing abusive relationships. Others were escaping persecution, political or religious. Some were whistleblowers who'd exposed corruption and now had targets on their backs. A few were families caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, witnesses to crimes they couldn't unsee. Thomas helped them all. He gave them money, new identities, safe passage to new lives. And he kept meticulous records, not of their names or destinations, but of their stories. Family number 41, read one entry from 1987. Mother, 2 daughters, ages 7 and 9. Fled domestic violence. Husband connected to local police. System failed them 3 times. Gave them $80,000, documents for Oregon. Wished them well. Hope they find peace. Family number 58, another entry from 1994. Young man, barely 20, witnessed murder by gang members. Testified, gang has connections everywhere. Needed to vanish completely. Gave him $120,000, documents for Alaska fishing industry. Brave kid. Hope he survives. Story after story. Life after life, each one saved by this quiet man and his hidden fortune. Maya read until her eyes burned, until the words blurred together, until she felt like she knew Thomas, understood him, could hear his voice in her head. He'd been alone. No family of his own, no children, no wife. My calling required solitude, he'd written in a reflective entry from 2003. To help ghosts, you must become one yourself. I chose this path knowing it meant walking it alone. But I've saved 73 families. That's 73 reasons my life mattered. That's enough. On her 9th day in the cabin, Maya discovered something that made her blood run cold. She was reading an entry from 2006 when a name stopped her heart. Family number 70, Thomas had written. Grandmother and granddaughter. The grandmother worked as a housekeeper for certain powerful people who were involved in activities they couldn't afford to have exposed. She saw too much, knew too much. They made it clear she needed to disappear. Came to me through an old contact. The granddaughter was 8 years old, small for her age, with serious eyes that had seen too much too soon. Name was Sarah. Had a daughter she loved more than life. Gave them $100,000, documents for the East Coast. The grandmother hugged me, said I was saving more than their lives, I was saving their future. Hope the little girl gets to grow up safe. Maya's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the journal. Sarah. Her grandmother's name had been Sarah, and Maya remembered dimly from when she was very small, before her grandmother died, stories about having to leave their old home quickly, about starting over, about a kind man who'd help them when no one else would. She flipped frantically through the pages, looking for more details. In the next entry, Thomas had added, "Sarah reminded me why I do this. She worked for a family named Sutherland, real estate developers with ties to organized crime. Used her as household help, but talked freely in front of her, thinking she was invisible. When bodies started showing up connected to their properties, Sarah knew she was a liability. Smart woman, brave woman. The granddaughter will grow up safe because of her." Sutherland. Maya remembered that name. She'd heard it once, years ago, when she was maybe 6 or 7. Her grandmother had woken up screaming from a nightmare, and young Maya had crawled into bed with her. Sarah had held her close and whispered, "We're safe now. The Sutherlands can't find us. We're safe." At the time, Maya hadn't understood. Now she did. Her grandmother had been one of the 73. Thomas had saved them, had given them new lives, new identities, new hope. And when Sarah died of cancer 4 years ago, when Maya had entered the foster system because there was no other family, no other options, she'd lost that protection, lost that safety net. The identity Sarah had built had been just solid enough to give Maya a childhood, but not strong enough to last beyond her grandmother's death. And now, by pure chance or fate or something beyond understanding, Maya had found her way back to the source of that original salvation, had stumbled, frozen and desperate, into the same refuge that had once saved her grandmother. The symmetry of it was staggering, impossible, beautiful. Maya sat on the cold stone floor of the underground chamber, Thomas's journal open in her lap, and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of connection, of belonging, of finally understanding that her grandmother's love and sacrifice had been real, documented, witnessed by this careful man who dedicated his life to helping people like them. She read for hours that day, finding 2 more mentions of her grandmother in subsequent entries. Thomas had checked on them, discreetly, over the years, had verified they were safe, rebuilding their lives. The last mention was from 2007. Heard through contacts that Sarah is sick, cancer. The granddaughter is in good hands, or so I hope. Did what I could. Pray it was enough. It had been enough for a while, until it wasn't, until the system swallowed Maya whole, but now she was here. In the place her grandmother had once stood, protected by the same walls, warmed by the same fire, surrounded by the same fortune that had bought her family's freedom once before. The question that had been circling in Maya's mind since the discovery crystallized into sharp focus. What was she supposed to do with all of this? Over the next several days, Maya explored the underground chamber more thoroughly. The crates of cash represented only part of the fortune. The gold bars, each weighing about 1 kilogram, numbered in the hundreds. She counted 217 of them, each worth approximately $60,000 at current market prices. That was $13 million in gold alone. The jewelry collection was extensive and clearly valuable. Diamond necklaces, rings with stones the size of her thumbnail, watches from brands she recognized as expensive even without knowing their exact worth. Conservatively, maybe $10 to $15 million in jewelry. But the real wealth, she discovered, was in the documents. Stock certificates from companies that had grown exponentially over the decades. Bearer bonds, basically anonymous IOUs that could be cashed by whoever held them, totaling over $50 million. And property deeds, dozens of them. Land in Colorado, buildings in Oregon, a warehouse in Nevada, a small apartment complex in California. Thomas had invested the money he'd accumulated, grown it, protected it, all while continuing to help people. The filing cabinets contained meticulous records of every transaction, every property, every investment. It was all legal, all documented, all carefully maintained. Thomas had been many things, but careless wasn't one of them. Maya found letters too, hundreds of them. Letters from the families Thomas had helped, sent to a post office box, thanking him, updating him on their lives, telling him about children born, businesses started, safety found. A whole archive of gratitude, of lives rebuilt, of hope made real. Dear friend, one letter began, dated 1991. You saved us 5 years ago, gave us money to start over after we witnessed something we shouldn't have. We're in Montana now, have a small ranch, 2 kids now, both healthy. We named our son after you, though we never knew your real name. We call him Tom. Thank you for giving him a world to be born into. Forever grateful. Another, from 2001. It's been 12 years since you helped us disappear. The man who hurt us is in prison now. We're safe. My daughters are in college. One wants to be a doctor, the other a teacher. None of this would exist without you. You gave us more than money. You gave us tomorrow. Maya read until her eyes ached, until the weight of all these saved lives pressed against her chest. 73 families, hundreds of people, all given second chances by a man who'd asked nothing in return except that they live, survive, thrive. What happens next will challenge everything this young girl thought she knew about right and wrong, about keeping secrets and telling truths, and remind us why sometimes the greatest treasures aren't the ones we can spend, but the ones that spend themselves on others. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. On her 14th day in the cabin, Maya woke to the sound of an engine. Distant but unmistakable. A vehicle somewhere in the forest getting closer. Her heart hammered as she jumped up, rushed to the window. Through the trees, maybe half a mile away, she could see a dark SUV moving slowly along what must have been a logging road or fire trail. They were searching. Had to be. The foster home would have reported her missing. Police would have searched the area. But this far out? After 2 weeks? That seemed excessive unless someone else was looking. Someone who knew about this place. Someone who knew about Thomas's fortune. Maya's mind raced. She grabbed her backpack, stuffed it with supplies, preparing to run if she had to. But where? The snow was still deep. She'd barely survived getting here. Running now, in daylight, leaving tracks, would be suicide. The SUV circled for an hour, moving in a grid pattern, searching. Then it stopped. She watched through a gap in the curtains she'd fashioned from an old blanket. 2 men got out, both wearing heavy coats, both moving like professionals. Not police. Something else. They spoke to each other, too far away for her to hear. One pointed in different directions. They were deciding. Then they split up, each taking a different search pattern. One headed away from the cabin, the other headed toward it. Maya's hands shook as she watched him approach. He moved carefully, methodically, checking behind trees, examining the snow for tracks. He was maybe 200 yards away now. Then 100. Then 50. She backed away from the window, pressing herself against the stone wall near the fireplace. Her fingers found the hidden stone by instinct, pressed and twisted. The wall began to slide open. She didn't hesitate. She slipped through the gap and descended into the darkness of the chamber below, leaving the entrance open just a crack so she could see up into the cabin. The underground chamber was pitch black, except for the thin line of grey light from above. Maya held her breath, listening. Footsteps crunched through snow, then stopped. Right outside the cabin, the broken window. He'd seen the broken window. She heard him approach the door. Try the handle. It was still locked from the inside. Then the sound of glass crunching. He was climbing through the window, the same way she had 2 weeks ago. Heavy boots hit the floor above her. She watched through the crack as the man's shadow moved across the cabin. He was thorough, checking everything, opening cabinets, looking under the bed frame, examining the fireplace. He was looking for something specific, not a runaway girl, something else. He spent 10 minutes in the cabin. Then he spoke, and Maya heard him clearly. Nothing here. Place is empty. Hasn't been used in years. He was on a phone or radio. Yeah, I checked. Just an old cabin. Some animal probably broke the window. No signs of recent occupation. But he was wrong. The fire had burned out hours ago, but the ashes were still warm. The pump by the sink had been used recently. Her supplies were hidden, but they were there. He wasn't looking carefully enough, or he didn't care. He just wanted to say he'd checked and move on. She heard him climb back out the window, heard his footsteps crunch away through the snow. heard the SUV engine start up again, then fade into the distance. Only when silence had settled back over the forest for a full 30 minutes did Maya allow herself to breathe. She climbed back up into the cabin, her legs weak, her heart still racing. That had been too close. Way too close. Someone was actively searching this area. Someone who might come back. Someone who seemed to know about remote cabins in these mountains. She spent the rest of the day making the cabin look even more abandoned than before. She swept away any obvious signs of occupation, hid her supplies even better, even scattered some old debris around to make it look more decrepit. If they came back, she needed them to see exactly what that man had reported. Nothing worth investigating. That night, unable to sleep, Maya returned to Thomas's journals. She read by the light of a small candle she'd found, keeping the flame tiny, worried about light showing through the windows. She was searching for something now, a clue about why someone else might be looking for this place. She found it in an entry from 2007, one of the last Thomas had written. Had a visitor today, man named Garrett. Claimed to be from a private security firm. Asked questions about my banking days, about clients I may have helped. He was fishing, testing, seeing what I knew and what I'd say. I said nothing. Played the confused old man. But he knows something. Maybe not everything, but something. I need to be more careful. The cash is secure. The cabin is hidden. But if they're starting to look, starting to ask questions, then my time is running out. Need to move up my timeline. Seal everything. Make it impossible to find unless you know exactly what you're looking for. 2 more entries mentioned Garrett, each time with more concern. Then the final entry, dated 3 months later. Sealing the cash tomorrow. My health is declining faster than expected. If Garrett or others like him come looking, they'll find only an abandoned cabin in the woods. The mechanism is perfect. Unless someone stumbles on it by pure chance, by desperate need, the fortune stays hidden. That's how it should be. Let it wait for someone who needs it as much as those 73 families needed me. Let it be their miracle, not some corporation's profit margin. Maya closed the journal slowly. So Thomas had been right. Someone had been searching even then 15 years ago, and they were still searching now. The man in the SUV, he'd been methodical, professional, private security, just like Garrett had been. But what were they looking for? The money? The evidence of Thomas's operations? Something else entirely. And how much did they really know? She spent the next few days in a state of heightened alertness, jumping at every sound, watching through the windows for any sign of the SUV's return. But the forest stayed quiet. Snow fell intermittently, covering tracks, muffling sounds, wrapping the cabin in layers of white silence. During those tense days, Maya continued reading. She found a letter tucked into the back of journal number 11, addressed simply, "To whoever finds this." The handwriting was Thomas's, but shakier, written near the end of his life. If you're reading this, you found not just the fortune, but the truth of what it represents. 73 families saved from circumstances that would have destroyed them. 73 second chances, bought with money that powerful people wanted to keep hidden, wanted to hoard, wanted to use for purposes far darker than salvation. I acquired this fortune over 40 years of careful work. Some of it was legitimate profit from wise investments. Much of it was money I liberated from those who'd gained it through suffering and oppression. I stole from thieves. I robbed from robbers. I took what had been taken unjustly and returned it to the world in the form of hope. If you found this place, you're either very lucky or very desperate. Probably both. The fact that you're here, reading this, means you need help. You need a second chance. You need what I've spent my life building. Take what you need, use it wisely, use it kindly, and if you can, if you have the strength and the will, continue what I started. Find someone else who needs saving and save them. That's all I ask. The fortune isn't an end, it's a means, it's fuel for miracles. Don't let it sit here forever, growing dust and darkness. Let it move, let it flow, let it do what it was always meant to do. Save lives. Maya read the letter 3 times, each word settling deeper into her understanding. Thomas wasn't just leaving her money. He was leaving her a mission, a purpose, a way to transform tragedy into triumph, not just for herself, but for others. But she was 12 years old. What could she possibly do with $230 million? How could a kid, a runaway, someone with no legal standing and no protection, possibly access this fortune, let alone use it to help others? The answer came to her slowly, over days of thinking, planning, reading more of Thomas's careful documentation. She couldn't do it alone. She'd need help, adult help, legal help. The kind of help that could navigate systems and bureaucracies and banks without triggering alarms. She'd need someone she could trust absolutely. Someone who understood running, hiding, surviving. Someone who'd been saved themselves and understood the value of second chances. She remembered something from one of the letters in the archive, a letter from 2003. "If you ever need help yourself," it had read, "contact my daughter. She knows what you did for us. She knows the truth, and she'll help however she can. Her name is Patricia. She runs a legal aid clinic in Denver." Maya found the letter again, read it more carefully. Patricia Morgan, daughter of family number 62. Thomas had saved them from witness intimidation back in 1998. The daughter had gone on to become a lawyer, specializing in helping people in desperate situations. And according to the letter, she knew about Thomas, knew what he did, knew the cabin existed. It was a thread, a connection, possibly the only one Maya had to the world beyond these stone walls that wouldn't result in her immediate return to the foster system. She made a decision. She'd stay in the cabin through the winter, staying safe, staying hidden. She'd read everything Thomas had left, learn everything she could. And when spring came, when travel was easier, when she'd had time to plan properly, she'd find Patricia Morgan. She'd tell her story. She'd ask for help. And somehow together, they'd figure out how to honor Thomas's legacy. How to turn this impossible fortune into what it was always meant to be: hope for the hopeless, refuge for the running, second chances for those who'd lost their first. For now, though, she was safe. Protected by stone walls and hidden wealth, and the ghost of a good man who'd spent his life proving that kindness could be practical, that mercy could be methodical, that love could be logged in ledgers and counted in cash. Maya fed the fire, wrapped herself in thick blankets, and opened the next journal. She had months of winter ahead of her. Months to learn, months to plan, months to transform from a scared runaway into something else entirely. She didn't know it yet, but that transformation had already begun. Not in the discovery of the fortune, but in the reading of those letters, in the understanding that she wasn't alone in her suffering. That 73 families had walked similar paths, had faced similar fears, had been saved by the same careful hands that now, through time and intention, were reaching out to save her too. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady. Inside, the fire crackled warmly. And deep below, in a chamber carved from stone and lined with hope, $230 million sat waiting for its next mission, its next miracle, its next chance to prove that sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what you keep, but what you give away. Winter deepened around the cabin. By Maya's count, she'd been there for 23 days when she found the box. It was tucked behind the filing cabinets in the underground chamber, small enough that she'd missed it in her earlier explorations. Cedar wood, carefully sealed with wax, with a simple brass clasp holding it closed. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white, color, Polaroids with dates written on the back. Thomas had documented some of the families he'd helped, carefully, respectfully, always with their permission according to notes he'd left with each photo. Maya spread them across the table, studying faces of people who'd walked through fear and found safety. Then she found a photograph that made her stop breathing. A woman stood in front of the cabin, this cabin, holding the hand of a small child. The woman was younger in the photo, maybe in her 40s, but Maya recognized her instantly. The set of her jaw, the gentle eyes, the way she stood with quiet dignity despite obvious exhaustion. It was her grandmother, Sarah, And the child holding her hand, small for her age with serious dark eyes, was Maya herself. She couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old in the photo. She had no memory of this moment, no recollection of ever being at this cabin before. But the evidence was right there in her hands, undeniable and impossible. She flipped the photo over. Thomas's handwriting on the back. Sarah and her granddaughter Maya, June 2004. Stopped here on their way east, gave them supplies, additional funds. The child will be safe now, made sure of it. Maya's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the photograph. She'd been here before. Her grandmother had brought her here, to this exact place, 19 years ago. They'd met Thomas. He'd helped them not just once, but twice. And somewhere in the fog of early childhood, that memory had been lost, buried under years and trauma, and the simple fact that 3-year-olds don't remember much. But Sarah had remembered. Had she thought about this place in her final days? Had she wished she could bring Maya back here to safety when the cancer was stealing her away? Had she died knowing her granddaughter would be vulnerable, unprotected, at the mercy of a system that didn't care? Maya dug deeper into the box, finding more documents related to her grandmother. Thomas had kept tabs on them, even after that second meeting. Notes documented Sarah's declining health in 2018 and 2019. Hospital bills, legal documents attempting to arrange guardianship. And then, a letter Thomas had written but apparently never sent, dated March 2019, just months before he died. Dear Sarah, I heard about your illness. I'm not well myself. Cancer has a cruel sense of timing. I wanted you to know that if anything happens to you, if your granddaughter needs help, the cabin is always there. The mechanism to open it is simple. Tell her about the stone. Tell her how to find safety when the world becomes unsafe. I won't be here to help her myself, but what I've built can still serve its purpose. Please tell her. Don't let her face the world alone without knowing there's a place, a refuge, waiting. Thomas. But he'd never sent it. According to a note clipped to the letter, Thomas had died that same month, suddenly, before he could mail it, and Sarah, already deep in her own battle with cancer, had died 7 months later. 2 guardians gone within a year, leaving Maya to navigate foster care alone, never knowing about the cabin, never knowing about the fortune, never knowing she had a lifeline waiting in the mountains. Until desperation and a winter storm had led her here anyway. Maya pressed the letter to her chest and cried. Not from sadness, though there was that, but from the overwhelming weight of connection, of being known, of mattering to someone even after they were gone. Thomas and her grandmother had both tried to protect her, had both cared, had both left pieces of themselves behind to catch her when she fell. She'd fallen, and they'd caught her. Even from beyond death they'd caught her. Over the following days, Maya dove deeper into Thomas's records, piecing together not just individual stories, but patterns, connections, a whole hidden network of salvation. Thomas hadn't worked alone, she discovered. He'd had contacts, people in various cities who'd help him move his refugees to safety, establish new identities, find housing and work. Many of those contacts were people he'd helped previously. Family number 36 had gone on to become a social worker in Seattle, quietly helping Thomas place other families. Family number 51 ran a small hotel in Portland that always had rooms available for people who needed to disappear for a while. It was a chain of paying forward, of rescued people becoming rescuers, of salvation multiplying across years and miles. But the records also revealed something darker. Starting around 2005, Thomas's notes became more cautious, more coded. References to unwanted attention and questions from the wrong people appeared frequently. He mentioned Garrett multiple times, the private security investigator, but also other names, companies, organizations that seemed to be searching for something. Maya found a folder marked Threats and Warnings. Inside were letters, emails printed out, even transcribed phone messages, all of them asking questions about Thomas's banking days, about clients who'd disappeared, about money that couldn't be accounted for, about offshore accounts and hidden assets. One letter from a firm called Sentinel Security Solutions, dated January 2007, was particularly direct. Mr. Thomas, our clients have reason to believe you possess information and possibly assets related to their business interests from 1978 through 1995. They are willing to compensate you generously for the return of said assets and your cooperation in certain matters. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Failure to respond will necessitate more direct forms of inquiry. Thomas's handwritten note at the bottom of the letter read, "Thieves asking for their stolen goods back. Rich men who earned their wealth through suffering want what I liberated. They can rot." More letters followed, each more insistent. By 2008, the threats had become explicit. "We know about the families you've helped relocate. We know about your activities. We know you've been hiding assets that belong to our clients. This can be resolved amicably or otherwise. Choose wisely." Thomas's final journal entries took on a desperate tone. They're closing in, not sure how much they really know versus how much they're guessing. But I'm old, sick, running out of time. Need to seal everything now. Make it impossible to find. Let the fortune sleep until someone worthy finds it. Someone who needs it, not these corporate vultures picking over bones. The last dated entry, from March 19th, 2019, was brief. Everything sealed. Cabin secured. Chamber hidden. If I die tomorrow, it's done. 73 families saved. $230 million protected. Not a bad legacy for a small-town banker who decided to play Robin Hood. Let them search. Let them wonder. They'll never find it. Not unless someone stumbles on it the way I intended, through desperate need and pure chance. End of record. He died the next day according to the death certificate Maya found in another folder. Heart attack, sudden and final. The cabin had sat empty for 4 years before Maya found it, but clearly someone was still searching. Maya thought about the SUV, the men who'd circled the area, the professional way they'd moved. Sentinel Security Solutions, or someone else. How many people were looking? How much did they know? She found partial answers in documents detailing Thomas's original liberation of the funds. He'd worked at a bank in Denver from 1955 through 1998. During that time, he'd carefully, methodically diverted money from accounts belonging to what he called profiteers of misery, slumlords who extorted poor families, businessmen who ran sweatshops, developers who displaced communities, loan sharks, crime bosses who hid their money in legitimate banking. Thomas had been their banker. He'd known where every dollar came from, whose suffering had paid for it. And bit by bit, over decades, he'd moved it, skimmed, diverted, hidden, all while maintaining perfect records that showed nothing amiss. He'd been brilliant and patient and completely committed. But those men, or their children, or the organizations they'd built, they hadn't forgotten. They knew money was missing. They suspected Thomas. And now, 15 years after his death, they were still searching for their fortune, not realizing it was being used to save the very people they'd exploited. The irony would have been perfect if it weren't so dangerous. Maya spent her 31st day in the cabin doing something she'd been avoiding, turning on her phone. She'd kept it off, preserving the battery, hiding from whatever messages waited there. But she needed information, needed to know what was happening in the world beyond these stone walls. 3% battery. She worked quickly. No signal for calls, but she'd downloaded maps before fleeing the foster home. She pinpointed her location as best she could, somewhere in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, about 40 miles from the nearest town. Remote, isolated, perfect for hiding. She opened her email, using the cabin's weak but functional Wi-Fi signal she'd discovered was somehow still active, probably paid for automatically from some account Thomas had set up years ago. Dozens of messages loaded, most from the foster system, social workers, even a few from Mrs. Henderson with subject lines like, "You need to come back," and "This is serious." But one email, received just 2 days ago, made her breath catch. The sender was p.morgan@denverlegally.org. Patricia Morgan, the lawyer, the daughter of family 62, the one Thomas had mentioned. "To whoever is using Thomas's connection," the email began, "I monitor this address as a courtesy to his memory. If you've found his refuge, you're likely in desperate need of help. I can provide it. I knew Thomas, I know what he did, I know what he built, and I know people are searching for it. Contact me if you want to survive what comes next. Patricia Morgan, Denver Legal Aid Clinic. Maya read it 3 times, her heart pounding. Patricia knew. Knew about the cabin, knew about the fortune, knew about the threats. But could Maya trust her? What if this was a trap? What if Patricia was working with Sentinel Security? She scrolled through older emails on the account, finding years of brief check-ins from Patricia. Annual welfare check. Hope the refuge remains secure. Thinking of Thomas today. His legacy continues. Still monitoring, still ready to help if needed. Year after year, Patricia had kept watch, had honored Thomas's work, had remained loyal even after his death. Maya made a decision. She hit reply and typed quickly, aware her battery was dying. My name is Maya. I'm 12. I found the cabin, found everything. People are searching. I'm scared. I need help. Please. She hit send just as the phone died completely, screen going black. Now, all she could do was wait. 3 days passed. 3 days of watching through windows, jumping at every sound, second-guessing her decision to reach out. What if the email had been intercepted? What if she'd just told dangerous people exactly where to find her? On the 4th day, she heard vehicles. Multiple engines approaching fast. Maya's heart hammered as she rushed to the window. Not one SUV this time, but 3. They came to a stop at the edge of the clearing, blocking any escape route. Doors opened. 6 men emerged, all wearing dark tactical gear, moving with military precision. This wasn't a random search. This was a raid. Maya didn't think. She grabbed her backpack, stuffed it with the journals and photographs, and descended into the chamber. But this time, she didn't hide. She worked frantically, gathering documents, deeds, evidence of everything Thomas had done. If they found the chamber, if they found the fortune, at least she could preserve the truth. Above her, she heard them breach the door. Heavy boots, multiple voices. Clear the main room. Check the kitchen. Nothing here. Wait. Someone's been here recently. Fire pit is warm. Supplies are fresh. What happens next will push this young girl to the edge of an impossible choice, reveal a truth about courage that transcends age and circumstance, and remind us why sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Sir, there's something odd about this wall section. The voice came from directly above her. They'd found it, found the mechanism. Maya heard the grinding of stone on stone. Light flooded the chamber as the wall slid open. She looked up to see a man's silhouette at the top of the stairs, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Well, well, he said, starting down the steps. Looks like we finally found Thomas's nest egg. Maya pressed herself against the far wall, clutching the backpack to her chest. The man reached the bottom of the stairs, his flashlight sweeping across the crates of cash, the gold bars, the filing cabinets. He whistled low. Boys, you need to see this. We just found Fort Knox. More boots on the stairs. 4 men now in the chamber, spreading out, examining everything. One of them noticed Maya. Sir, we've got a kid here. The first man turned his flashlight on her. Maya squinted against the glare, trying to see his face. He was older, maybe 50, with grey at his temples and cold eyes that calculated everything. What's your name? He asked. Maya didn't answer. You been living here? Silence. He moved closer. Look, kid, I don't know how you found this place, but it doesn't belong to you. This fortune was stolen from its rightful owners a long time ago. We're here to return it. Liars! Maya's voice came out stronger than she felt. Thomas didn't steal from rightful owners. He took from criminals and used it to save people. 73 families. I've read all his records. The man's eyes narrowed. You've read the records? All of them. Every journal, every letter, every document. I know exactly what this money is and where it came from. Then you know it needs to be returned. To who? To slumlords and loan sharks and people who got rich exploiting others? Maya stood straighter. That's who you work for, isn't it? The children and grandchildren of the men Thomas took from. You're not returning anything. You're stealing it back so you can keep profiting from other people's suffering. The man's face hardened. You're a kid. You don't understand how the world works. I understand that Thomas spent 50 years saving people with this money. I understand that my grandmother was one of them. Family number 70, Sarah. He saved us. And I understand that letting you take this fortune would be betraying everything he died protecting. Your grandmother? The man studied her more closely. Sarah, you're that Sarah's granddaughter. You knew about her. We know about all 73. Thomas kept excellent records, and we've been piecing them together for years. Some of those families were witnesses against our clients. Others were whistleblowers. All of them caused significant damage to legitimate business interests. Legitimate, Maya spat the word. There's nothing legitimate about what your clients did. Thomas documented all of it. The extortion, the violence, the suffering. That's blood money, and he gave it back to the people you stole it from. The man sighed. This is getting us nowhere. Rogers, secure the kid. We'll figure out what to do with her later. The rest of you, start cataloguing everything. We need a full inventory before we move it. One of the men moved toward Maya. She backed up, clutching the backpack. Don't touch me. Kid, don't make this harder than it has to be. That's when they heard it. More vehicles outside, car doors slamming, new voices, official sounding. This is the Colorado State Police. We have a report of trespassing and potential child endangerment. Everyone out of the structure now. The grey-haired man cursed under his breath. How did they know? Through the open chamber entrance, Maya heard a woman's voice, clear and authoritative. I called them. My name is Patricia Morgan. I'm an attorney representing the owner of this property and the minor child currently inside. You're trespassing on private land, and you're threatening a vulnerable child. I suggest you leave immediately, or I'll be adding kidnapping charges to the complaint I'm filing. Patricia. The email had worked. She'd come. The grey-haired man looked at Maya, calculation in his eyes. This isn't over. We have legal claims to this fortune. Courts will decide. Let them, Maya said quietly. I have all of Thomas's records. Every transaction, every source, every dollar documented. When a judge sees where this money really came from and what Thomas did with it, your clients won't want it anywhere near a courtroom. The man's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Exposure was the last thing his clients wanted. Move out, he ordered his team. We're leaving, but kid, remember this. We found you once. We can find you again. They filed up the stairs, leaving Maya alone in the chamber with her racing heart and her backpack full of evidence. She waited until she heard vehicles departing, then climbed up into the cabin. Patricia Morgan stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 state police officers. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd fought hard battles and won. When she saw Maya, her expression softened. You must be Maya. Maya nodded, suddenly feeling every bit of her 12 years, suddenly exhausted and overwhelmed and more scared than she'd been even when running through the storm. You're safe now, Patricia said gently. I promise, you're safe. Maya wanted to believe her, but as she looked past Patricia to the forest where the black SUVs had disappeared, she knew the truth. She'd made herself a target. She'd stood up to dangerous people, threatened to expose them, and they wouldn't forget. But she'd also protected Thomas's legacy, had preserved his records, had refused to let his life's work be stolen by the very people he'd fought against. That had to count for something, had to mean something. They'll come back, Maya said quietly. Patricia nodded. Probably. But next time you won't be alone. Next time you'll have lawyers, protection, and the full weight of the law on your side. Can you really protect this place? Protect what Thomas built? Patricia smiled, sad but determined. Thomas saved my family when I was your age, gave us a second chance when we had nowhere else to turn. I've spent my entire career paying that forward, helping people the way he helped us. So yes, Maya, I can protect this, and I can protect you. That's what he would have wanted. One of the police officers cleared his throat. Ma'am, we need to discuss the situation with Child Services. This girl is reported as a runaway from a foster placement. I'm aware, Patricia said crisply. And I'm filing for emergency custody as we speak. I'm a licensed foster parent in Colorado. I've already spoken with her caseworker. Given the circumstances, the abuse she fled from, and the danger she's currently facing, I believe the court will approve temporary placement with me while we sort out the larger issues." "What larger issues?" Maya asked. Patricia looked at her seriously. "The fortune, Maya. $230 million can't just sit in a basement forever. We need to figure out what to do with it. How to honor Thomas's intentions while also protecting it from people like the ones who were just here. And we need to figure out your role in all of this." "My role? Thomas left this to whoever found it. You found it. That makes you, in a very real sense, the inheritor of his legacy. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" Maya looked back at the chamber entrance, hidden once again behind stone. She thought about the 73 families, the letters of gratitude, Thomas's words about continuing his work. She thought about her grandmother, saved twice by this place and this fortune. She thought about being 12 years old and running through a storm with nowhere to go and finding refuge in a place built on the simple belief that people deserved second chances. "I want to continue what he started," Maya said. "I want to help people the way he helped them, the way he helped me." Patricia smiled, real warmth in her eyes. "Then that's exactly what we'll do, together. But first, let's get you somewhere warm and safe, somewhere you can rest and heal and be a kid for a while. The fortune can wait. Thomas waited his whole life to find the right person to carry on his work. It can wait a little longer." Maya gathered her belongings, took one last look at the cabin that had sheltered her, and followed Patricia out into the winter afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Behind her, the cabin stood silent and strong, keeping its secrets, protecting its purpose. She didn't know what came next, didn't know how they'd navigate the legal complexities, fend off the people searching for the fortune, or transform $230 million into the kind of help Thomas had envisioned. But for the first time since her grandmother died, Maya felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. She felt hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind she'd clung to in the storm, but the solid, sustainable kind built on truth and connection and the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. Thomas's legacy had caught her when she fell. Now it was her turn to make sure it caught others too. 73 families had been saved. But there were so many more who needed saving. So many people running through storms, looking for refuge, desperate for a second chance. The work was just beginning, and this time Maya wouldn't be running. She'd be standing her ground, protecting what Thomas had built, continuing what he'd started. 12 years old, armed with truth and backed by allies, ready to fight for something bigger than herself. The little girl who'd taken refuge in a mountain cabin had found more than shelter. She'd found purpose, and that, she was beginning to understand, was the greatest fortune of all. The drive from the mountains to Denver took 3 hours. Maya sat in the passenger seat of Patricia's SUV, watching the landscape transform from snow-covered wilderness to suburbs to city. She'd barely spoken since leaving the cabin, processing everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. Patricia didn't push. She understood silence, understood that some things needed time to settle before words could catch up. Instead, she drove carefully, occasionally pointing out landmarks, giving Maya space to breathe. "You hungry?" Patricia asked as they entered the city limits. Maya realized she was starving. "Yeah." They stopped at a small diner, nothing fancy. Just burgers and fries and milkshakes thick enough to require serious effort. Maya ate like she'd been hollowed out, which in a way she had been. The past month had burned through every reserve she'd had, physical and emotional. "Better?" Patricia asked as Maya finished her second burger. "Much better." "Good, because we need to talk about what happens next." Maya set down her milkshake, suddenly nervous. "Am I going back to foster care?" "Not if I can help it. I've already filed paperwork for emergency custody. Given your situation, the abuse you fled from, and the fact that I'm a licensed foster parent with experience in high-risk cases, I'm confident the judge will approve it. at least temporarily. And then? Patricia leaned forward. That depends on a lot of things. But Maya, I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this out of obligation or because Thomas would have wanted it. I'm doing this because you're a remarkable kid who deserves better than what you've been given. You deserve safety, stability, and a chance to be 12 years old without carrying the weight of the world. Tears pricked Maya's eyes. But what about the fortune? What about continuing Thomas's work? We'll figure that out, together. But first, you need to heal. You need to go to school, make friends, be a kid. The fortune has waited this long. It can wait until you're ready. Over the next 6 months, Maya's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined possible. Patricia's home was a modest 2-story house in a quiet Denver neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a garden, a kitchen that always smelled like something good cooking. It was the opposite of the foster homes Maya had known, places that felt temporary and cold. This felt like home. Patricia enrolled her in middle school. The first day terrified Maya more than the storm had. Classrooms full of kids who'd never run through mountains in winter, never found hidden fortunes, never had to fight men in tactical gear. How could she possibly relate to them? But slowly, carefully, she found her place. She joined the coding club after discovering she had a talent for computers. Made a friend named Sophie, who didn't ask too many questions about where Maya had come from. Started getting A's in English because years of reading Thomas's journals had taught her how stories worked, how words could carry weight and meaning beyond their simple definitions. At night, she'd work with Patricia on the fortune. They'd converted one of the spare bedrooms into an office, walls covered with maps, timelines, legal documents. Patricia had assembled a team, a forensic accountant, a property lawyer, a financial advisor who specialized in charitable foundations. Together, they were building something unprecedented. The key, Patricia explained during one late-night planning session, is structure. We can't just start handing out cash. That's how Thomas operated because he was one man working in shadows. But you're creating something that will outlast you, something institutional. That requires proper legal frameworks. They decided on a foundation. The Thomas Sarah Foundation, named for the 2 people who'd saved Maya when she needed it most. Its mission was simple: provide emergency assistance and long-term support for children fleeing dangerous situations. No bureaucracy, no waiting periods, just immediate help when help was needed most. The fortune was carefully liquidated and invested. Not all at once, but strategically, preserving value while generating income. Patricia's financial advisor estimated the foundation could distribute $10 to $15 million annually while maintaining its principal. That was enough to help thousands of kids every year. Forever. But Maya wanted more than just money distribution. She wanted something Thomas had never had the resources to create. A network. A system. A way to connect people who needed help with people who could provide it. She spent hours designing the website, working with developers Patricia hired to make it secure and accessible. Kids in crisis could reach out confidentially. Vetted social workers and lawyers in every state stood ready to respond. Safe houses, legal aid, counseling services, all coordinated through the foundation's resources. And at the center of it all, the cabin. Patricia worked legal magic, securing the property through a trust that made it nearly impossible to seize or claim. It was renovated carefully, respectfully, maintaining its essential character while making it safer and more comfortable. The underground chamber remained, but now it held something different. Archives. Thomas's original journals, preserved and digitized. The letters from families he'd helped, catalogued and protected. A library of salvation, proof that one person's dedication could ripple across decades and hundreds of lives. The cabin became a retreat, a training center where social workers and counselors could learn about trauma-informed care, where kids who'd been through the system could come to heal in the same place that had sheltered Maya. It was no longer a secret. It was a symbol. Maya turned 13 in Patricia's home, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her. Sophie came to the party, along with 3 other friends from school. They ate cake and played video games and acted like normal teenagers, because that's what they were. That's what Maya was finally allowed to be. But later that night, after everyone had gone home, Maya sat with Patricia on the back porch, watching fireflies dance across the garden. "I've been thinking," Maya said quietly. "About?" "About going public, telling the story, all of it. Thomas, the fortune, everything." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "That's a big decision. It would mean exposure, attention. The people who came to the cabin that day, they'd know for certain where the money went. They might cause trouble." "Let them try. We have all of Thomas's records. We have proof of where that money came from, what it represented. And we have documentation of every dollar we've spent from the foundation, every kid we've helped. We're doing exactly what Thomas intended. What can they really do?" "Sue, harass, make life difficult." Maya smiled. "They already tried that. I was 12 alone and I didn't back down. Now I'm 13. I have you. I have lawyers. I have a whole team. I'm not scared of them anymore." Patricia studied her for a long moment. "When did you grow up?" "Somewhere between running through a blizzard and standing in a basement telling grown men they were wrong. I don't know exactly when, but I know I'm not that scared little girl anymore." "No," Patricia agreed. "You're not. You're someone who's going to change the world." They went public 6 weeks later. Maya did an interview with a major network, sitting in Patricia's living room telling her story. The escape from foster care, the storm, finding the cabin, discovering the fortune, learning about Thomas and her grandmother and the 73 families, standing up to the men who wanted to steal it all back. The interviewer, a woman named Janet, who'd built her career on hard-hitting journalism, was visibly moved by the end. "What do you want people to take away from this story?" she asked. Maya thought carefully before answering. "That wealth isn't just money. Real wealth is what you do with what you have. Thomas had millions, but his wealth was the lives he saved. My grandmother had nothing but love and determination, but her wealth was making sure I survived. And now I have this foundation, but its wealth won't be measured in dollars. It'll be measured in how many kids don't have to run through storms looking for safety. That's what I want people to understand. We're all rich in something. The question is what we choose to do with it." The interview aired on a Sunday night. By Monday morning, Maya's story was everywhere. News sites, social media, morning shows. The foundation's website crashed from traffic. Donations poured in. People inspired by Thomas's story and Maya's courage wanting to add their own resources to the mission. But not everyone was supportive. Sentinel Security Solutions issued a statement claiming the fortune consisted of stolen assets and that Maya was unlawfully distributing property that belonged to their clients. They filed a lawsuit demanding the return of all funds and damages. Patricia had been expecting this. She filed a countersuit naming not just Sentinel but their clients, demanding they publicly explain the source of the money they claimed was stolen from them. "Discovery will be very interesting," she told reporters. "If they want to pursue this, they'll have to admit in court exactly how their parents and grandparents earned the money Thomas took. I don't think they'll like that conversation." She was right. The lawsuit was quietly dropped 3 weeks later, though Sentinel's statement said they reserved the right to pursue other legal remedies. Translation: they'd lost this battle but weren't giving up the war. Maya didn't care. She had more important things to focus on. The foundation was operational now, helping its first wave of children, a 15-year-old boy in Ohio fleeing gang violence, twin sisters in Arizona whose foster placement had become dangerous, a 17-year-old girl in Montana who'd aged out of the system with nowhere to go. Each one received immediate assistance, emergency housing, legal support, counseling, and funds to start rebuilding their lives. And each one received something else. A letter from Maya, handwritten, personal. She told them about Thomas, about the 73 families, about how she'd stumbled into a cabin during a storm and found not just shelter, but purpose. She told them they weren't alone, that someone believed in them, that their second chance had arrived. The letters became legendary. Kids shared them online, posted photos, talked about how much it meant to receive something personal from someone who understood. Maya spent hours each week writing them, making sure every recipient knew they weren't just a number or a case file. They were seen, valued, worth the effort. By the time Maya turned 14, the foundation had helped over 300 children. The number grew weekly. And with each success story, Maya felt Thomas's presence, felt his approval, felt like she was finally fulfilling the purpose he'd spent his life building toward. But success brought challenges. Some criticized the foundation for not doing enough, for not helping more kids faster. Others questioned whether a teenager should have such control over so much money. There were audit requests, investigation threats, politicians who wanted to make examples. Patricia shielded Maya from the worst of it, handling the legal and public relations aspects, while Maya focused on the work itself. But Maya wasn't naive. She knew what people said, knew some thought she was too young, too inexperienced, too damaged by her own past to be trusted with this responsibility. She proved them wrong by simply doing the work, by showing up every day, by making careful decisions, by listening to experts while trusting her own instincts about what kids in crisis really needed, by being exactly what Thomas had been, dedicated, methodical, and absolutely committed to helping people over everything else. On the 2-year anniversary of finding the cabin, Maya returned to the mountains. Patricia drove her up, along with Sophie and 2 other friends from school who'd become trusted confidants, who knew the whole story and had chosen to be part of the solution. The cabin looked different now, still rustic, still stone and wood and simplicity. But there were solar panels on the roof, providing clean power. The windows had been replaced, double-paned and secure. A new sign hung near the door, Thomas Sarah Retreat Center, a place of refuge, hope and second chances. Inside, the main room had been expanded. Comfortable furniture, a modern kitchen, bookshelves full of resources about trauma and healing. The fireplace still worked, still crackled with the same welcoming warmth. But now there were photographs on the walls, Thomas and some of the families he'd helped, Sarah holding young Maya's hand, Maya herself standing in this same room 2 years ago, scared and desperate and on the edge of something she couldn't have imagined. The underground chamber had been transformed into a museum and archive, climate-controlled, beautifully lit, respectfully curated. Visitors could see Thomas's journals, read letters from the families he'd saved, understand the scope of his life's work. But they couldn't touch the original documents. Those were sealed behind glass, preserved for history. Maya walked through the space slowly, her friends giving her room to process. She stopped at a display showing Thomas's last journal entry, the one where he'd written about sealing the cache and hoping someone worthy would find it. "You did good," she whispered to the ghost of a man she'd never met, but somehow knew better than almost anyone. "We're doing good. I promise we'll keep doing good." That evening they had a small ceremony. Maya, Patricia, the foundation's core team, and a handful of kids the foundation had helped, teenagers who'd traveled from across the country to be here for this moment. They stood in front of the cabin as the sun set, painting the mountains in impossible colors. Maya spoke, her voice stronger now than it had been at 12, confidence earned through action and decision and refusing to back down. 2 years ago, I ran through a storm with nowhere to go. I was scared, alone, convinced the world had nothing left for me. Then I found this place, and I learned something important. We're never as alone as we think we are. Someone, somewhere, has left us a path forward. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's hidden behind stone walls in mountain cabins. But it's there. We just have to be brave enough to look. She paused, looking at the faces around her. Kids who'd walked similar paths, who'd faced similar fears, who'd found their own versions of refuge and hope. Thomas saved 73 families over 50 years. That's remarkable. That's heroic. But here's what I realized. We've helped over 700 people in 2 years, not because we're better or smarter or richer than Thomas was, but because we're not alone, because we've built something together, a network, a community, a movement of people who believe second chances aren't just possible, they're necessary. She held up a small stone, ordinary except for the white paint marking its surface. Thomas left clues, mechanisms, ways to open doors for those who needed them. So I'm leaving one too. Behind this cabin, in the garden we planted, there's a time capsule. Inside are letters from every kid we've helped so far. Their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, and instructions for how to access the foundation, how to reach out, how to find help. In 50 years, or 100, when someone finds that capsule, they'll know. They'll know people cared. They'll know help existed. They'll know they're not alone. She walked to the garden, freshly planted with wildflowers and native grasses, and carefully buried the capsule while everyone watched. It was a small gesture, but it felt enormous. A promise to the future. A continuation of Thomas's legacy. Proof that hope could be planted and would grow. By the time Maya was 16, the Thomas Sarah Foundation was considered one of the most effective child welfare organizations in the country. They'd helped over 2,000 children with a success rate that baffled traditional social services. Nearly 80% of the kids they helped went on to stable housing, completed their education, and avoided the criminal justice system. The secret wasn't complicated. It was what Thomas had known all along. People need immediate help when they're in crisis. Not forms to fill out, not waiting periods, not bureaucratic processes that take weeks or months. They need someone to say, I see you, I believe you, here's help, now. The foundation provided that. 24/7 hotline, response teams in every state, emergency funds available within hours, legal support, counseling, housing assistance, all coordinated and immediate. It was revolutionary simply because it treated crisis like crisis, not like paperwork. Maya graduated high school early, at 17, with a perfect GPA and acceptance letters from every college she'd applied to. But she deferred them all. She had more work to do with the foundation. College could wait. Thomas had waited his whole life to find someone to carry on his mission. Maya wasn't going to make kids in crisis wait for her to finish school. Patricia supported the decision, though she made Maya promise to eventually pursue higher education. Knowledge is power, she said. And you're going to need all the power you can get to keep this going. Maya agreed. She enrolled in online classes, studying nonprofit management, social work, and law. She'd be educated, but she'd do it while continuing the work, not by putting it on hold. On a cold November morning, 5 years after she'd first found the cabin, Maya received a letter. Not an email or a message, but an actual handwritten letter, forwarded through the foundation's offices. The return address was a prison in California. Inside, the handwriting was shaky but legible. Dear Maya, you don't know me, but I'm writing because I think I might be related to you. My name is Elizabeth. I'm 68 years old and I've been in prison for 30 years. I saw your interview, the one where you talked about your grandmother Sarah and Thomas helping her escape from people named Sutherland. That story unlocked memories I'd buried for decades. Sarah was my sister. We were separated when she fled. I stayed behind, tried to fight the Sutherlands legally, gather evidence. They framed me for crimes I didn't commit. I've been here ever since. But seeing you, hearing our family name, knowing Sarah's granddaughter survived and thrived, it gave me something I haven't had in years: hope. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know you have family. You're not alone, and I'm so proud of what you've become. Love, your great aunt Elizabeth. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Family. She had family. Patricia helped her verify the story, hire investigators who uncovered the truth. Elizabeth had been wrongfully convicted, evidence planted by associates of the Sutherland organization, the same people her grandmother had fled from. She'd been in prison for 3 decades for crimes she hadn't committed. The Foundation's legal team took on her case. It took 8 months of appeals, new evidence presentations, and public pressure. But finally, on a sunny June morning, Elizabeth walked out of prison, exonerated, her conviction vacated. Maya was there to meet her. They'd never seen each other before, but the connection was immediate. Elizabeth looked like an older version of Sarah. Same eyes, same quiet strength. They held each other and cried, 2 survivors of the same evil, finally reunited through the legacy of the man who'd saved them both. Sarah would be so proud, Elizabeth whispered. She saved you, and you've saved so many others." "We saved each other," Maya replied. "That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work." Elizabeth moved to Denver, into a small apartment the foundation helped her secure. She became a volunteer, working with kids who had incarcerated parents, understanding their pain in ways no one else could. Another life transformed. Another person paying forward the grace they'd received. By the time Maya turned 18, the foundation had helped over 5,000 children. The original fortune, carefully invested and managed, had actually grown despite the millions distributed. Thomas's $230 million had become nearly $300 million through wise stewardship and generous donations from people inspired by the story. But Maya knew the real wealth wasn't in the bank accounts or investment portfolios. It was in the network of 7,000 volunteers, in the 300 safe houses across the country, in the 1,000 social workers who'd been trained in trauma-informed care, in the 5,000 kids who'd been given second chances and were now living lives they'd never thought possible. The real wealth was in the letters Maya still received every single day. "You saved my life. I didn't think anyone cared, but you showed me I was wrong. Because of you, I'm still here. Because of you, I have hope." That was wealth that couldn't be measured or calculated. That was the kind of fortune that multiplied with every person it touched. On the 5th anniversary of finding the cabin, Maya stood in front of a crowd of 2,000 people. Donors, volunteers, kids the foundation had helped, journalists, politicians who'd become allies. They'd gathered in Denver for the foundation's annual celebration, a chance to reflect on the work and look toward the future. Maya, now 17 but carrying the confidence of someone who'd lived 3 lifetimes, stepped up to the microphone. "5 years ago, I was 12 years old, running through a storm, certain I wouldn't survive the night. I found a cabin I'd never seen before, broke through a window, and discovered I'd stumbled into something much bigger than shelter from the snow. I'd found purpose, legacy, proof that one person's dedication could echo across decades and save hundreds of lives." She paused, looking out at faces that had become familiar, people she'd worked alongside to build something extraordinary. "Thomas spent 50 years saving 73 families. In 5 years we've helped 5,000 children, and we're just getting started. Because this isn't about me, and it wasn't really about Thomas either. It's about the simple truth that people deserve second chances. That kids in crisis deserve immediate help. That wealth means nothing unless it's used to make the world less cruel, less cold, less likely to let 12-year-olds freeze to death in storms because no one bothered to notice they were running." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "Thomas left me more than money. He left me a mission. And I'm leaving something for whoever comes after me, a blueprint, a system, a network of people who believe, like I do, that no child should ever feel as alone as I felt that night. We're not perfect. We can't save everyone, but we can save someone, and that someone deserves every bit of effort we can give." She smiled, real warmth in her expression. "So thank you. Thank you to everyone who's volunteered, donated, spread the word, taken in a kid who needed refuge. Thank you for proving that Thomas was right. That hope isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, and together we're making sure it's always available, always accessible, always waiting for whoever needs it most." The applause was thunderous, but Maya barely heard it. She was thinking about a cabin in the mountains, about a man who'd dedicated his life to quiet heroism, about her grandmother who'd protected her until she couldn't anymore, about all the kids who'd walked through storms and found shelter because one person had decided their life mattered enough to build something that would last. That night, Maya returned to Patricia's house, her home for 5 years now, legally adopted just a few months ago. They sat on the back porch, just like they had so many times before, watching fireflies dance across the garden.
"You know what the best part is?"
Maya said quietly.
"What?"
Thomas never knew if it would work. He sealed that cabin, hid that fortune, wrote those instructions, and had no idea if anyone would ever find it. He died not knowing if his life's work would continue. But he did it anyway. He built it anyway. He hoped anyway. Patricia nodded. That's faith, real faith, not in any particular outcome, but in the possibility of goodness. I used to think finding that cabin was luck, random chance, but now I think it was something else. Thomas built a beacon. And people in storms, we're drawn to beacons. We find them because we need them, and then we become them for others. So, what's next for you? Patricia asked. You're about to turn 18, legally an adult. You could do anything. Maya smiled. I'm going to keep doing this, keep building, keep helping, maybe go to college eventually. But this foundation, this work, it's not a phase or a project. It's my life, the same way it was Thomas's life. I'm not running from storms anymore. I'm building shelters from them. He'd be proud, Patricia said. They both would. Maya knew she was right. Somewhere, somehow, Thomas and Sarah were watching, were proud, were at peace knowing their sacrifices, their choices, their love had rippled forward and would continue to ripple long after Maya herself was gone. Because that's what real wealth does. It doesn't sit in vaults growing dust. It moves, it flows, it touches lives and transforms them. It turns scared 12-year-olds into confident young women who change the world. It turns hidden fortunes into open arms. It turns desperate nights into hopeful mornings. Thomas had started with nothing but conviction and compassion. He'd built an empire of hope, one family at a time. And now Maya was carrying it forward, expanding it, making sure that every child who needed refuge could find it, not in 50 years or 100, but now, today, in their moment of greatest need. The little girl who'd taken refuge in a mountain cabin had become a refuge herself, a shelter from the storm, a promise that help was always available for those brave enough to reach for it. And deep in the mountains, in a cabin that had witnessed miracles and sheltered ghosts, the fire still burned, waiting for the next person who needed it, ready to offer warmth and safety and the beginning of a new story. Because some lights never go out, some promises never expire, and some fortunes, the real ones, the ones that matter, are measured not in dollars, but in lives saved, hope restored, and futures made possible. Anyone can change the world if they're willing to be changed by it first, to see wealth not as something to hoard but something to share, and to remember that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we give away. As Maya stood in that garden, under stars that had witnessed everything, she understood what Thomas had known all along. True wealth isn't what you have, it's who you save. It's the hope you plant in the darkest moments. It's the refuge you build for those still running through storms. And in that understanding, in that commitment, in that choice to be a beacon instead of just seeking one, Maya had found something no amount of money could ever buy. She'd found home, not a place, but a purpose. Not walls and a roof, but a reason to wake up every morning and fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. The scared little girl who'd broken through a cabin window 5 years ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who'd transformed $230 million into something priceless. Proof that goodness wins, that hope survives, and that one person, armed with conviction and compassion, can echo across time and save hundreds, thousands, millions of lives yet to come. Because for Maya, and for the 5,000 children she'd already helped, and for the countless thousands more who would follow, the mountain cabin wasn't the end of a desperate journey. It was the beginning of something far greater, a movement, a mission, a promise that no child would ever run through a storm alone again. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories that will move you. Click now to discover more journeys of courage and hope, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe every child deserves a second chance and every storm eventually leads to shelter.